West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
There's some Supreme Court news to tell you about today, and brand new financial disclosure forms made public just today. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas acknowledged that in the last year, he took 3 trips aboard a private jet that belongs to his billionaire friend and Republican megadonor Harlan Crow. Crow also paid for a trip to the Adirondacks in New York, according to Justice Thomas. It is the first time in years that Thomas has disclosed receiving any kind of hospitality gifts from Crow, and we may not have ever heard about it were it not for a series of news reports this year from ProPublica that highlighted multiple lavish trips and gifts that Thomas received from Crow over the years and failed to report. In this latest filing, Clarence Thomas admits to travel paid for by Crow, and even suggests that in May of 2022, he traveled by private plane to a Dallas conference due to security concerns stemming from the leaked draft Dobbs opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. Thomas included a statement via a lawyer with the disclosure, which reads in part, quote, "The financial disclosure process should never be weaponized against any justice simply because any organization or anyone disagrees with the way a justice thinks, writes, or votes." Joining our conversation, co-founder and executive director of progressive judicial advocacy group Demand Justice, Brian Fallon, is back with us. Plus, senior editor for Slate and host of the Amicus podcast, Dahlia Lithwick, is with us. I'm always decoding what they're saying, and I guess, Brian Fallon, what a lawyer for Clarence Thomas is saying, that no one should report on documents that no one denies are accurate or legitimate about undisclosed gifts from Harlan Crow to Clarence Thomas because they don't like the things Clarence Thomas rules on. Is that what the lawyer is saying on behalf of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas?
That indeed is what the lawyer seems to be saying, and that's consistent with what Clarence Thomas defenders have been saying for months as these reports by ProPublica and other outlets have been out there. They've been trying to say that this is just a smear campaign waged by left-wing interest groups, that there's no there, that these were perfectly valid transactions that didn't need to be reported. And that's belied by the updated filing that Clarence Thomas made today. The filing itself cops to a number of past failures. It admits in the filing today that the real estate transaction where Harlan Crow purchased Justice Thomas's mother's home was a reportable event that should have been included in his 2014 disclosure. And they admitted that there were other failures to disclose things like bank accounts and life insurance policies that belonged in previous reports. And they've only disclosed now for the first time, or corrected the record for the first time in this report issued today. And so what they've been trying to say publicly to try to discredit the ProPublica report is contradicted by the report that was filed today. There was a lot of there, in fact. They've had to admit to a bunch of things that he failed to report. Having said that, though, Nicole, there's still a bunch of unanswered things even after this report was filed today. For instance, there's nothing in the filing today that explains the RV financing that he got that helped him purchase that RV that's been valued at over $250,000. There was nothing in there that explained or came clean about the tuition payments that Harlan Crow apparently made for his nephew that he treated like a son. And so even as they corrected the record on certain things and tried to do a damage control effort on certain things, there's still a number of questions looming out there even after the reporting of this filing today.
You know, Dahlia, there's such a tonal acknowledgement that the rulings are widely unpopular with a large majority of Americans, and that's why we don't report our gifts as we're required to, even under the meager ethical disclosure rules that govern it. I mean, I don't understand how they get away with sort of the arrogance with which they begrudgingly comply with the few requirements they have. I mean, the image of the court is in disrepair, reputationally speaking, and that is no good for the country. I don't wish that plunging numbers of Americans hold the Supreme Court in high regard, but that is where we are. That is where they are. And these snarky statements via a lawyer with a sideswipe at a really important news organization doing really important work that no one disputes the accuracy of is beneath even Clarence Thomas's lawyer.
I mean, in some sense, Nicole, the through line here is the victimhood that we've had all along, right? That the real, genuine victim of Dobbs, of the Dobbs leak, the genuine victim of everything is Clarence Thomas. And that's unsurprising in some sense. That's the card he's been playing for a long time. You know, in a way, I guess what's interesting about this particular filing and the tone of the letter that comes with it from his attorney is that the argument finally is, oh, now we're going to tell you why Clarence Thomas, who claimed that he didn't like lavish travel and he doesn't like international trips, he just wants to hang out in his RV with his wife in, Walmart parking lots, why he's been traveling around, on private jets and, going to luxury resorts around the country. And the answer is, it's our fault. We made him do that. He's so afraid of the haters that he's been forced to travel abroad. And it's just such, as you say, a tonal anomaly, given what Clarence Thomas and the conservative supermajority have wreaked upon the nation, the actual tangible harms of Dobbs and Bruen, of the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And so the idea that there's only one person who is suffering at the moment in America, and it's Clarence Thomas, and it's because we're mean to him, is just so astoundingly, ear-splittingly painful to have to process seriously. And I almost think it comes across as trolling.
Yeah, I think the technical term for it is gaslighting. It is this begrudging acknowledgement that the ProPublica reporting was not just accurate, but I think it's a tell that there's a whole lot more there. And so let's start sweeping, right? Let's sweep out all the stuff we did this year. But I wonder, Brian Fallon, what else this is revealing? I mean, does this reveal some sort of effort to start complying before other investigative journalists dig deeper and find something else?
It should, if they wanted to get out ahead of this, and if they wanted to show some dexterity in responding to the new era that we're in, where there's going to be scrutiny of the justices, you would think that this would beget a new era of disclosure and erring on the side of transparency. But we're not getting too many signs of that because, for instance, they're still not voluntarily committing themselves to a code of ethics. So we're still having that debate publicly, and the Senate is still trying to pass that over the justices' objections. To Dahlia's point, there is that line in the report, in the filing today, where Justice Thomas is trying to say that it was because of the security fears after the Dobbs leak in the spring of 2022 that required me to fly a private plane to Texas on this one trip. Well, I mean, it's a little hard to take at face value when in the next line he's disclosing that he had an all-expenses-paid trip to the Adirondacks, also financed by Harlan Crow, where Harlan Crow apparently paid for not just his private flight, but also all his meals and all his lodging. I mean, did the security fears require him to take free meals and free lodging in the Adirondacks? So he still hasn't gotten with the program. As recently as this past calendar year, he's still taking free trips. And once you become accustomed to a lifestyle like that, you think you're entitled to it. And I'm not sure that he'll stop. Maybe he'll have to disclose it now because of the updated ethics guidelines that forced the disclosure of these trips from 2022. But I don't know that he'll, have the gumption to stop taking them. The one good thing that I think that we can take away from today, Nicole, is that there's a new era here. Like, this is the first time I ever got a breaking news alert about one of these annual financial disclosures from Supreme Court justices. So that's a good thing for transparency.
It is Friday, the 1st of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, we've made it to Friday, and it's not a completely liquid diet. Fret not. We will have tidbits, morsels of, more sustenance of the solid kind. Don't worry. All right, we're not all going to be floating away, as they say. Okay. Well, how are you? We made it to the weekend, and quite a week we've had behind us, and we have weeks ahead. Isn't that the way time works? But we're talking about news time, and remember all those years? The Trump years, where you pretty much fretted the weekends because what was going to happen this time? Were they going to extend their deportation wish? Oh, we're going to make sure that no Muslims are in this country whatsoever. We're going to kick them all out. And you thought, my God, what's next? And there was always something next. Icebox baby gulags. Just on and on and on. Doesn't seem as fretful. Weekends seem as if it might be something we can look forward to, like a Labor Day weekend. Our media seems to be in on some sort of, shall we say, strategy with a cohort, shall we say, a cohort of billionaires, trillionaires, our betters, determining what the hoi polloi can get away with now. Just let them have a little bit of freedom, but not too much. So it seems as if they want to make sure that we are in unending chaos and fret. Almost 190,000 new jobs. Nothing to sneeze at, right? But it's down a tad. First, Joe is like accused of wanting to tank our economy with all these jobs. Doesn't he know that more jobs is bad for the stock market? Now that some incremental lesser job numbers have come out, the media's out there going, he doesn't care about the workers. Look at him. But I love the other graphic I saw. Unemployment. And they had it in sort of like scare font. Unemployment is up to 3.8%. Oh, my God. I remember back in the day when trickle-down economies were, first floated, shall we say. And you know what we used to say about trickle-down economy back in the day? Yeah, we're going to get pissed on. And we did for decades. They want to try to piss on us again, don't they? Yes, they do. But during trickle-down economy, like 5-6% unemployment, you needed to have that, we were told. You needed it. Yeah, it's like fuel for the economy. Okay. More jobs is bad. Remember that? So up to 3.8%. Give me a break. And that's only part of it. It's all the other too is like the normalizing of, well, goose-stepping stormtrooper Nazis. I don't know. Is that hyperbole? Hell no. It's an apt description. Not even, it's not hyperbolic descriptions either. It is what it is. Oh boy. Because you can tell that the S is going to hit the fan by the amount of trolling right-wingers from Marsha Blackburn to Lauren Berbert to that MTG weightlifting lady. She needs to lift weights for all the pipe bombs she had to carry around D.C. God. Well, they picked their soldiers, the goose-stepping stormtroopers. And now, some of them are threatening a MAGA brown shirt stormtrooper Kristallnacht all over America if they don't get their way. And shut down the economy too. I don't know which is worse. They're all bad. Why were these seditious insurgents allowed to continue their insurgency? When do we get to step in and say, that's enough? You guys don't get to violently overthrow the United States of America. You've been threatening to do it again. We see what you're capable of. It's not going to happen. Also, I'm a little upset about having or cutting in half the sentences of these seditious insurgents who were supposed to be sentenced to 30-some-odd years. And now they're getting like 15 or 17. And people are saying, that's a long time. Hell yes, it's a long time. And it's even longer when you got 30 years. That's the whole effing idea. Want them out another 15 years where they can spew their hate and get their retribution? My God. Whatever happened to locking them up and throwing away the key? How many times have we heard that? Now we get to finally throw away the key and we don't get to. Jeez. Everything we learned in the movies, and you get to throw away the key. Of course, on the other hand, they promised us jetpacks. We never got the jetpacks. And I guess we were promised to be able to lock them up and throw away the key. Get to lock them up. Just can't throw away the key. 15, 17 years. Yeah, I know. It's a long time. So's 33. Anyway, I like the 33 number. It's sort of like a pie in the face. Almost. What? Or 33 revolutions per minute. That's what they thought. Well, sorry. You guys effed around. I like Joey Biggs. He's crying on the stand. Oh, what about my kids? I want to be able to see my kids grow. No one gave an F about Pence's kids. No one gave an F about Nancy Pelosi's kids and grandkids. Not one whit. Not one whit. So I'm sorry. Mess around in the seat of government with clubs and actual shooting weapons. Everybody says, oh, they came in unarmed. No, they actually had weapons of the shooting kind, plus clubs, machetes, whatever. Flagpoles. Unarmed. Their First Amendment right to protest or whatever. So you got all of these right-wing mouthpieces out there flooding social media, especially shitter. We can't say that? I don't know. Xylophone? Zitter. Maybe it should be zitter. Maybe it should be zitter instead of shitter. Maybe it should be zitter. I don't know. Maybe I can work with that. Pustules of
Filth. Anyway, that's what you get in the timeline on that platform. Constant, just barrage of gish gallop BS. Over and over and over. And it's absolute lies. Absolute. And people better give Bridget Gabriel, they better start, her friends better start warning her. We didn't like Axis Sally. We didn't like Tokyo Rose. All right? So, I don't know. KKKK Betty. Better watch out. Jeez. So, yeah, I'm kind of tired of this constant barrage of, Russian active measures flooding our social media and elsewhere. The actual media out there, too, seems to be, repeating it. Yeah. Okay, well, we do have a curated show for you today, so why don't we dive into that and give you a rundown on what we have in store as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Hey, the police chief of Tillamook, Oregon, was arrested for stealing drugs and cash from the evidence locker. Yeah. And he's came from another little town, too, and they're looking at their evidence locker. And then when he was just like a regular cop, everywhere he's gone, there's been some issues with the evidence locker, but the previous ones have said, well, we can't pin it on him, though. But he was there. Anyway, we'll get into that in just a moment. Late last year, DeSantis signed revisions to an existing law that will now increase the suffering of Hurricane Idalia victims. Yeah. Make it harder for them. And heat-related deaths are up, and not just because it's getting hotter. After the break, we moved to the chef's table, where 4 Finnish men were charged with plotting racially motivated attacks using 3D printed weapons. And a German court convicted a Russian man of plotting the murder of an exiled Chechen dissident. Boy, that seems to happen a lot there. Well, all that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page to the left from that chat room link that is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And those who become recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio really help us out. I'll tell you why. Because they are able... And if you are able to, is what I'm trying to get at, if you're able to afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, well, that helps us pay our bills and then fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting the hostile, violent takeover of the United States of America for the last over 13 years. So there you go. Boy, time flies, too. It hardly seems that long, but it has been. And we've been continuing this because it is our civic duty, and it should be everybody's civic duty to stop this steady erosion of our, well, constitutional republic, or representative democracy is what I like to call it. Some people say a representative democratic republic. You could say that too. But whatever it is that it is, we want to keep it. It's noble. And there's a lot of unnoble types who don't want it to continue, and we have to stop them. So thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's going to be Twitter. I don't care what this XBS is. But anyway, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Threads, wherever it is, we're going to be there. And you can find us at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of those and a lot more. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc. at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. So then if you go to my social media feed, you'll be able to find the links to those diaries, and you'll be able to find the show notes and links because they're right there. And then you can read the actual articles. See? Check up on my work. Okay, do it. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Wherever podcasts can be found, they just can't be found on Stitcher because SiriusXM did what they did, and we don't like it. Damn them. Okay. Got that out of the way. Now, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Malheur Enterprise by the publisher and editor of that great organ called the Malheur Enterprise, and that's Les Zates, a veteran Oregon journalist. Raymond K. Rao, age 56, former NISA, or is it NISA? Police chief, who left to become chief in Tillamook, has been charged with theft and official misconduct in connection with evidence missing from that agency's locker. The Tillamook County District Attorney, Aubrey Olson, on Wednesday of August 30th, charged Rao with 2 counts of first-degree official misconduct, 1 count of second-degree theft, and 1 count of third-degree theft. The charges are misdemeanors. What? Rao is charged with taking a controlled substance from the Tillamook Department's evidence locker on 2 occasions between October 1st of 2021 and April 8th of 2023. He is accused of taking at least $100 in cash belonging to someone else between October 1st of 2021 and May 8th of 2023. Misdemeanors. Police chief. Well, it's like a parking ticket. Here, I'll just pay my fine. According to the Tillamook Headlight Herald newspaper, Rao has been on leave from the Tillamook job since May. Tillamook city officials did not respond immediately on Thursday to requests for comment. The newspaper said Oregon State Police began an investigation last May when an audit found evidence had been tampered or removed in more than 80 cases dating back to 2005. Most of the tampering happened since 2021. Olson, on Friday of September 1st, declined to release the audit because of the criminal investigation. Rao had been chief in the coastal city since July of 2021. He served as chief of the NISA Police Department in September of 2012 until he resigned in 2021 of July to take the coastal job. And he had been elected to the NISA School Board in May 2021. Oh, grooming kids. Rao told the Enterprise at the time of his departure that he had been planning to retire before he decided to take over the larger Tillamook agency. Oh, really? Larger evidence lockers. Court records show he is being represented on the charges by Christine Mescal, a Portland attorney. We are working with the court to schedule his arraignment, which will be set in the coming weeks, she wrote in response to an email seeking comment and providing questions. Olson has turned the case over to Colin Benson, a senior assistant attorney general who will act as a special deputy district attorney. An official with the Oregon Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, the agency that certifies police officers for the state, said on Thursday yesterday it had not been told of the charges. Rao has been certified as a police officer since 1997, working then in Milton Freewater, according to agency records. The Ontario Police Department previously had problems with its evidence locker, but Police Chief Michael Away said there was no indication that Rao ever had access to that locker. Abby Vasulis of Mother Jones brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Hurricane Idalia struck Florida 190 miles north of Tampa on Wednesday as a Category 3 storm, a classification that causes devastating damage according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. With 125-mile-per-hour winds upon landfall, it fell just short of the Category 4 metric. This region of Florida has not seen such strong wind gusts and storm surges in more than 125 years. Many roads are flooded with water levels up to at least 8 feet. Elsewhere in the Sunshine State, fallen trees have hit gas lines and hundreds of thousands of people are without electricity as of Wednesday afternoon. The immediate death toll and damage from the storm, though, might not be the only nightmare Floridians face. The next one could relate to how insurance companies respond to damage claims. As the reporter wrote earlier this month, recent changes to Florida's tort laws, orchestrated by GOP lawmakers and Governor Ron DeSantis, will make it much harder for insurance or home insurance policyholders to sue their insurers for failing to adequately pay out claims for home damage. Idalia is the first hurricane to hit Florida since the laws were rewritten in December of 2022, in the dead of night, by the way, signed. And that was following Hurricane Ian. The sweeping revisions makes it more difficult for homeowners to sue their property insurance companies for acting in bad faith, and removes the right of homeowners to recover attorney's fees even in lawsuits they ultimately win. Additionally, the adjustments to Florida's insurance laws allow insurance companies to create new policies with mandatory binding arbitration agreements in exchange for a premium reduction, which will also thwart many homeowners' options to take insurers to court. Moreover, the legislation shortened the window in which policyholders can file claims with their insurers, invested $1 billion of taxpayer funds into a state-run reinsurance fund to help insurance companies mitigate their losses in the event of catastrophic events, and also narrowed eligibility for Citizens, Florida's state-run nonprofit company that provides insurance to people who cannot afford or find affordable coverage on the regular market. And as a note, home insurance premiums in the state are already 4 times the national average and still rising. But while Florida policyholders are paying more in exchange for fewer options in the event an insurance company acts in bad faith, the new law is a big win for DeSantis, whose political coffers have been boosted by the insurance industry. Philip Reese of the Kaiser Family Foundation Health News out of the Los Angeles Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Heat-related illnesses and deaths in California and the U.S. are on the rise along with temperatures, and an increase in drug use and homelessness is a significant part of the problem, according to public health officials and data from the CDC. Heat was the underlying or contributing cause of about 1,670 deaths nationwide in 2022, for a rate of about 5 deaths per million residents, according to provisional data from the CDC. That's the highest related death rate in at least 2 decades. Data from this year, which has been exceptionally hot in much of the country, are not yet available. The next highest death rate was logged in 2021. All right, let us now get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Family Matters. The Blue Beetle first appeared in Fox Features Comics in 1940. In the 1950s, Charlton House Comics bought the character, and in the 80s, DC Comics snatched up the heroes of Charlton House. In 2006, desperate to not be #DC So White, DC introduced a new young Latino Blue Beetles, Jaime Reyes. Today, as part of the Black Panther "Oh, we can actually make money off of non-white heroes" revolution, Reyes is the Blue Beetle that the DCU brings to the screen. But if Marvel's Black Panther is about culture as the superhero, the DCU's Blue Beetle is about family as superhero. Blue Beetle is not a family in jeopardy story. It's the lesser-used variation, family is everything, something they explicitly say at the beginning of the movie. Jaime Reyes is not the protagonist of this film. The entire Reyes family is. You know how women characters are written to do little other than support their men or worry about them? It's like that with the Reyeses. They're rarely apart from each other narratively or physically. It's even such that there's an almost kiss with the love interest that feels forced and wrong because her story's not about desire or love, it's about her being chastely absorbed into the family. Even the bad guys, though they're cast as white corporate soulless gentrifying military imperialists raiding your home like ICE supremacists, are, at their base, defined, in contrast to the Reyeses, as being a broken family. Family is everything is a stick that Blue Beetle swings again and again until you say, okay, I get it, just please stop hitting me, which is kind of how I feel about George Lopez in this movie. But if someone wants to tell me, no, you don't get it, that focuses Latinx culture in general and Mexican culture in particular, and back off because Blue Beetle finally gives us our own hero, also explicitly said in the movie, then I'll accept that and try to enjoy the rare DC flick where they don't want their heroes to be the real villains. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Brian Merchant is the tech columnist at the LA Times and the author of a new book called Blood in the Machine: The Origin of the Rebellion Against Big Tech. Blood in the Machine tells the story of the Luddites and what their plight tells us about automation today. And I've heard their movement mentioned a lot recently, particularly in relation to generative AI. For instance, news recently broke that copyrighted books, including those by Stephen King, were used to train an AI language model. And then King wrote an essay for The Atlantic in which he says he wouldn't forbid this type of thing and that anyone who would might as well be, quote, a Luddite trying to stop industrial progress by hammering a steam loom to pieces. This idea that Luddites just hated new technology is pretty pervasive. But is it accurate?
It is not accurate. It's one that's been lodged in the cultural consciousness for almost 200 years now, though, so it's hard to blame him. And, you know, I love Stephen King. I love his writing. I love his writing on writing. But he's fallen victim to this fallacy about the Luddites, which is that They were technophobic. They wanted to stop progress itself, which couldn't be further from the truth. So what the Luddites wanted to do was to stop the machinery that was very specifically exploiting them or being used as leverage against them to reduce their quality of life, to cut their wages, to force them into factories. So the Luddites protest against machinery, again, against very specific kinds of machinery. They were technologists. They loved technology themselves in many cases, but they had issue with specific machinery being used in specific ways, namely by elites who wanted to force them into factories and degrade their standard of living.
Would you say that their attempt to rebel against this succeeded or failed?
That's a really complicated question. It was illegal to form a union in those days, so they were forced to use very creative tactics to sort of register their complaint. And when they did take up arms in this very specific way, for the first 6 months or so, they were very successful in the short term in getting some of those wages raised, getting their conditions improved, getting back some of the bargaining power they had lost. In the medium term, they were less successful because their movement was violently crushed by the British state and by the Crown and by the industrialists who the Crown was assisting. And dozens of Luddites were hung, others were killed in those protests. And then the victors of that battle got the opportunity to impress upon history this idea that Luddism is backwards looking, establishing what's basically a propaganda campaign on behalf of those industrialists to equate progress with any kind of technology at all, even technology that could exploit hundreds of thousands of people as it did.
And we're in a moment now when technology is again threatening people's jobs. Specifically, there have been a lot of stories about generative AI being used to replace copywriters, the idea that it could threaten the jobs of software coders, that instead of hiring an illustrator, places are just going to use this AI-generated art. So can we draw any parallels? What parallels can we draw between the situation the Luddites were in and then the modern automation threatening jobs today?
The way that I would put it is that the parallels are uncanny. So much is aligned with what was going on at the Luddites' time that we can really go one-to-one in a lot of cases. So here's this revolutionary seeming new technology, AI, generative AI, that its creators are claiming have vast power, can replace vast numbers of jobs. That was very similar to what was happening 200 years ago. You had the entrepreneurs adopting things like the power loom or the wide frame or the implements that would automate various parts of the cloth industry, saying this new machinery is going to be a great boon to England. It's going to be an engine of progress. In reality, again, this is a parallel. Neither of the technologies were quite there yet, right? And so in a lot of cases, the technology could be used more powerfully by the entrepreneurs or by the industrialists as leverage or bargaining power or a means of saying, hey, we need to reduce wages because we're just going to use the machinery to do it anyway.
And you mentioned how when the Luddites were doing their protests, they didn't have unions. They didn't have the right to do this sort of collective action, as opposed to today when we have, for the first time in decades, in Hollywood, writers and actors, they're all going on strike, not solely because of AI, but that's definitely one of the issues that they're trying to deal with as part of these strikes. So do you think that they are more likely to succeed than the Luddites were?
Absolutely. I think the crucial difference is that, this is an industry that is very well organized, that has a good deal of power, and they can force their employers to the bargaining table to hash out these issues. We should be thankful that they have sort of sounded this clarion call because in a lot of ways, the same issues are going to be coming for other industries. So the writers and the artists stand to be more successful for that reason alone, that they are organized and it's popular. Again, I think, I don't know if I mentioned, the Luddites were super popular in the day. They were like Robin Hood. They were cheered in the streets because just about everybody understood the way that the wind was blowing.
And it's not just in the case of the writer's strike that I've heard the term Luddite used. Another example is that in San Francisco right now, there's a big rollout of these self-driving robo-taxis. And there have been a lot of issues coming up around this, but one of them is a group has been protesting them by putting traffic cones on the hoods of these cars because it tells the sensors that there's an obstacle, there's something wrong, and so the car stops with no damage to it, but it is a form of protest. And some of the protesters have been compared to Luddites. Now, the issue for them is not their own employment, but they are protesting this technology. Do you think it's still fair to say that this is a sort of Luddite movement?
Yeah, I think this is a Luddite tactic through and through, and not in the derogatory sense, in the sense that these are people who are standing up for their community when democratic channels have been sort of ignored. I mean, if you look at the polling data and you look at the general sentiment, people don't want driverless cars running rampant in their communities. We've seen very viscerally how dangerous it can be, how deadly self-driving car technology can be in some cases, and what a nuisance it can be to things like emergency service providers and firefighters, policemen. They've all come out against this and said, not yet. And it's unclear, I think, to most people why it needs to be rammed through, why the experimentation period can't be longer or can't be more careful. So if we can't get the bare level of assurances and transparency from government when new technologies are rolled out, I think it's completely justified for people to basically do Luddism.
And you've mentioned that the Luddites in the short term were successful, but in the long term, they were the subject of a propaganda campaign. We've got Stephen King being like, being a Luddite is futile. It's resisting technology for no purpose. And that's the idea that many people still have hundreds of years later. So if you were going to give advice to modern Luddites, what do you think they need to do to avoid the same fate?
You know, I think we're getting to the point to where people have at least loosened their knee-jerk reaction in that direction. We're kind of at this point again where the negative effects of technology in a lot of spheres, whether you're talking about in the working world or social media overstimulation, we're seeing a lot of the detrimental effects of technology, and we're seeing sort of a resurgence of this desire to be able to offer more input and have more say in how it's rolled out. We've sort of handed the keys to a handful of Silicon Valley giants and said, okay, see what you can come up with, and then we'll kind of deal with it. We'll take the rearguard action. But it does not have to be that way. And that's what I want to sort of beat home. Like the Luddites represented an alternate path. If we look at what they really stood for, it really comes down to a more just, more equitable, and more democratic development of technology, one that more people would have benefited from. How do we do that today?
Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leong. Our show is edited by Ella Feder and Alexa Lim. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. For more in-depth science news and features, go to scientificamerican.com. And if you like the show, give us a rating or review. For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Sophie Bushwick.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers and Iron Shipmakers of America was founded in Chicago. This joined two earlier Boilermaker unions into one. They decided to establish their headquarters in Kansas City, Kansas. 2 years later, the Boilermakers affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. The union represents members of 250 lodges in the United States and Canada. At the turn of the 20th century, the Boilermakers had about 8,500 members. But their membership expanded, especially during World War II, as shipbuilding grew for the war. By 1944, there were more than 350,000 Boilermakers. In 1954, they merged with the International Brotherhood of Blacksmiths, Drop Forgers, and Helpers and expanded their name to include these groups of workers. But what exactly is a Boilermaker? According to the union's website, the term can have many meanings. It might refer to a Purdue University student or alumni. whose football team started going by the name of the Boilermakers in 1891. Or Boilermaker might refer to dropping a shot of whiskey into a draft beer and drinking it all at once. But for the labor movement, a Boilermaker is someone that constructs and repairs boilers and the other workers who are part of the union. These might include blacksmiths, forgers, shipbuilders, cement workers, stove workers, metal polishers, and numerous other job descriptions. The Boilermaker's logo reflects these workers. It includes images of a ship, a worker working on a boiler, and a blacksmith's anvil. Below the images are found the words unity, progress, and protection, declaring the mission of the union and its members.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the low to mid-70s, considerably cooler than what we've had recently. Cloudy conditions at the moment with isolated thunderstorms this morning, with then mainly cloudy during the afternoon with more thunderstorms, and winds will be light and variable. We're expecting about 1/3 of an inch of rain from these storms. And then tonight we'll have lows in the upper 50s, thunderstorms early, then mainly cloudy after midnight. Winds light and variable, but it looks like it's bringing with it about 1/4 inch of rain overnight. Then partly cloudy tomorrow with highs near 80. We'll be having scattered thunderstorms in the afternoon with about 1/4 inch of rain, winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then it looks like rain will be tapering off on Sunday. Ragweed pollen is now the predominant pollen out there, hurting those who get hurt, and it is rated low. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 91 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is still in the high range at level 7, so you need to continue to take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.77 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 71 degrees and cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory that could disrupt critical infrastructure. Paris is 73 and cloudy. Rome is 84 degrees and partly cloudy. Kabul is 78 and clear. Kyiv is 77 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 degrees with rain and wind, and they do have a wind advisory. Tokyo is 82 and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 46 and clear. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay because of gale force winds. Chicago, Illinois is 68 and sunny. And New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Prosecutors in Finland filed charges yesterday, Thursday, against 4 Finnish men who are part of a radicalized domestic group for plotting attacks against migrants, critical infrastructure, and their perceived political opponents. Police said the men are also suspected of manufacturing weapons by 3D printing in preparation for a racially motivated armed conflict in Finland. 3 of the men have been charged with terrorist crimes for the manufacture of firearms and training to use them. Finnish public broadcaster YLE said the 4 embrace neo-Nazi ideology, particularly the concept of accelerationism, which is a fringe philosophy that promotes mass violence to fuel society's collapse and is favored by white supremacists. Preliminary investigations showed the defendant's activity did not progress to the level of preparation for a concrete act of terrorism, but according to Finnish police, the 4 men are suspected of collecting contact information of ideological opponents and associations, including supporters of leftist policies, and planning armed attacks on them. They also plotted attacks on key civilian infrastructure, such as electricity grids and railroads. Sound familiar? The men are also facing charges of firearms possession and narcotics crimes believed not to be related to the terrorism plot. That's how they're making money. The defendants, one of whom remains in police custody, only one, have pleaded not guilty to most of the charges.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
And more staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A German court yesterday, Thursday, convicted a Russian man of plotting the murder of an exiled Chechen dissident on orders from a cousin of the Russian Republic's Moscow-backed strongman, Ramzan Kadyrov. The Munich State Court sentenced the defendant, whom it identified only as Valid D, in line with German privacy rules, to 10 years in prison, and also ordered the confiscation of his car. He was convicted of agreeing to commit murder, preparing a serious act of violence, and violations of weapons laws. Judges found that a cousin of Kadyrov tasked him with killing an opponent who lives in Germany. They said the aim was to silence the elder brother of the dissident, a prominent opponent of the Chechen government who lives in Sweden and had already been targeted there. The court found that the killing was ordered between March and June of 2020, German news agency DPA reported. A court statement said the defendant tasked another Chechen man who testified as a witness with carrying it out. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday, yes indeed, Labor Day Monday, for River City Ash Labor Day Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all holiday weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.